I'd like to give a brief overview of how physician executives can use the ShiftBuilder application tool in order to help assign staffing solutions to different clinical sites. Um, First, I'd like to describe the data resources that are needed for this. We have in this application an API query that gets sent to the scheduling software server in order to get data about actual scheduling patterns at particular sites and particular days. We get data from the electronic health record with regards to patient arrivals, their timestamps with regard to the time they were assigned a bed, the time a physician saw them, the time that physician reached a disposition decision, and the time the patient was actually dispositioned. And really the only other data point we need is the patient acuity as measured by the nurse at triage, their emergency severity index that's documented in the chart is used for that. And for one of the metrics, we use billing data in order to arrive at the revenue value units that are arriving at any particular hour. Next is you can choose a particular site that you like to look at. Once you choose that, you can choose a metric that you like to observe. We have a number of metrics here. In this brief introduction, I won't go over all of them, but the idea is you want to choose a metric that's a good representation of the work demand on the physician. We have a variety of them, anywhere from the number of patients arriving to the emergency department, the number of patients arriving to a bed, the number of patients a physician is treating at one time, the revenue value units, and such. I won't go into details about how to determine the maximum capacity of a physician or advanced practice provider to exhaust their capacity to supply resources for that particular metric, but suffice it to say that you can make determinations and make adjustment to the maximal capacities. In this case, when it comes to patient arrivals, we're making the assumptions that doctors and advanced practice providers can see a maximum of 2.7 patients per hour. We can pick the date range that we are looking at. Here we're aggregating data for the first quarter, roughly, of 2019, short 2 weeks. And this is the date we're reading from the scheduling calendar. We're going to read data for all patient acuities. Here we pick the percentile. So the data we're seeing in this heat map represents the 80th percentile of the distribution of patient arrivals. So let's pick a specific example here. Say Wednesday at 2 p.m. at this particular site, the 80th percentile of patient arrivals from the distribution is 13 patients. Easy enough. We use this heat map to look at aggregate data by hour of day, day of week, and we can also use the software to divide this entire heat map by the max capacity we determined in order to arrive at the minimum number of providers needed in order to staff that particular hour. We can further then divide by the actual number of scheduled providers from the scheduling software to arrive at oversupply or over demand at particular times of the day. The darker the red is, the more oversupply you have. The darker the blue is, the more supply deficit there is at a particular time. Here visually, it's quite easy to appreciate that there's a deficit between supply and demand that is different at different times of the day. We can briefly look at a detail screen showing time trends of this distribution for a particular day and time. If we focused earlier on Wednesday at 2 p.m., then we could look at that time and see time trends for patient arrivals. This is the more commonly used screen called the advisor. We see the data read from the scheduling software for the actual shift patterns that have been assigned for this site. The black line here shows the 80th percentile for the metric we chose, patient arrivals. So at 2 p.m., we can see 80th percentile of patient arrivals, like we saw earlier, around 13. The height of the bars here represents for the particular capacity you chose what are the advanced practice provider resources available, the height of that bar, what are the doctor resources available. So if we assume doctors can see 2.7 patients an hour, having 2 physicians in the department sets a maximum for the number of patients that could be seen. And once you combine both numbers, you can see where you are with respect to the 80th percentile that's going to be needed to see the patients. You can easily address other contingencies by changing the percentile here. So the area in gray is the area in which you appear to have undersupply of resources, and the area above the curve is the area in which there's oversupply, suggesting that in this particular case, resources could be moved from the late PM to earlier in the day and reach a better match of supply and demand. Likewise, we can then go ahead and use this pattern in order to build a schedule that then addresses the specific needs of this department. So if we have a need to bring in a provider just a bit earlier, it'd be fairly easy to make adjustments and do that on the fly and see how those changes address the need of that particular clinical site.